These are the top 5 worst creatures in the history of Magic the Gathering. I was laughing out loud making this list, guys. There are some absolutely ridiculous creatures on this list. I just can't even believe some of these things got made. Let's get to a couple quick honorable mentions before we hit our list. Honorable mention number 1 comes from Ice Age. This is one of my favorites. This is Balduvian Shaman. Now, to be fair, just the fact that this is a 1/1 for 1 that's a relevant creature type in Cleric almost invalidates it from being in consideration, but I do think the text is so hilarious that we have to talk about this. Shaman reads, tap, permanently change the text of target white enchantment you control that does not have cumulative upkeep by replacing all instances of one color word with another. For example, you may change, quote, counters black spells to, quote, counters blue spells. Balduvian Shaman cannot change mana symbols. The enchantment now has cumulative upkeep 1. I've probably read this card 100 times and I still don't know what it means. I love to play packs of Ice Age in Chaos Draft because I like it when somebody opens Balduvian Shaman because I think it's hilarious. Let's get to honorable mention number 2. Honorable mention number 2 goes to another blue creature. This time we're talking Leviathan. Leviathan was the original biggest creature in Magic, costing 4 blue and 5 colorless for a 10/10 trample. It comes into play tap, does not untap during your untap step. Leviathan cannot attack this turn unless you sacrifice 2 islands, and sacrifice 2 islands, untap Leviathan, use this ability only during your upkeep. Creatures used to be so bad, you could just terror a Leviathan. Legitimately, your opponent could sack 2 islands to untap it, then they could enter their attack step, sack 2 more islands, and you could just terror. Oh my goodness. Look, it's still a gigantic 10/10 trample and it's iconic, so you can't really put it in the top 5, but I do have to talk about it because I think this card is absolutely ridiculous. We've all tried to make Leviathan work. It's just not even good enough by today's standards to even try to make work. And finally, we're going Cosmic Horror. Good lord, look at that art. That's just fantastic art. I do love me some Jesper Mirovs. Okay, so this is black, black, black 3 for a 7/7 first strike horror. That's like pretty good for back in the Legends days. However, during upkeep, you have to pay black, black, black 3, or Cosmic Horror does 7 damage to you and is destroyed. Again, back in the days of Arabian Nights Legends, getting a 7/7 first strike in black was a hard thing to do, so getting it for 6 was even better. However, the idea that you have to spend 6 just to keep this thing around, and then it's not just sacrifice it does 7 damage to you. You're gonna die if you don't pay your upkeep on your stupid creature. Creature's terrible. It's absolutely awful. All right, let's get to our actual top 5 worst creatures in the history of Magic. As a general rule, if a creature was just like a 2/2 for 2, or even like a 2/2 for 3, or a 1/1 for 1, it kind of gets invalidated because that's at least on curve and playable in limited formats, and sometimes as a relevant creature type. So cheaper creatures didn't get quite as harshly judged. All right, let's get to our number 5. Coming in number 5, we've got this beauty from Invasion. There was a cycle of leeches from Invasion, each for 1 color, that made your spells cost 1 more of that color. The idea being you were getting a good creature on rate, so paying 1 more mana for all your spells of that color wasn't going to matter that much. So here we have Alabaster Leech for white for a 1/3 leech. White spells you play cost 1 more to cast. The issue with this card and what makes it so bad is if you play it on turn 1 like a 1-drop would be intended, now the rest of your game is totally hosed because now you're just a turn behind. And the thing you're getting is a 1/3, which is so bad that if you draw it late game or even mid game, playing a 1-mana 1/3 is also terrible, and Leech is not a relevant creature type. There is absolutely nothing to like about Alabaster Leech, I guess except the fact that it blocks. Maybe in Standard, back in Invasion, you needed like a 1/3 blocker and a sideboard you could play for 1. I don't know. This card is awful. Joining the list at number 4, we've got this creature from the original Kamigawa block. This is such a funny creature. If you actually read it and think about it, how ridiculous this is. Takeno's Cavalry is white 3 for a 1/1 human samurai archer. It has Bushido 1. It states when this blocks or becomes blocked, it gets +1/+1 till end of turn, and it can tap to deal 1 damage to target attacking or blocking spirit. The thing is, none of that text can explain why you're paying 4 mana for a 1/1 that has a conditional ability that only targets a single creature type. On top of which, Bushido is especially irrelevant on 1/1 creatures because it dies to still almost anything. The rate on this card across the board is terrible. I can't even see myself playing this card in Limited. I think back in Kamigawa Limited, sometimes you could satisfy maybe playing this as a sideboard card in game 2 if you needed absolutely to be able to kill some flying spirits, or I think spirits were on the ground in that block, but this card is absolutely dog poop. Let's get to number 3. Number 3 on this list comes to us from the world of Mirage, a rare, believe it or not. Here we go. Warping Worm is 2 colorless, green-blue for a 1/1 worm. It has phasing. During your upkeep, pay the casting cost of this card, which is 2 colorless, blue-green, or Warping Worm phases out. When Warping Worm phases in, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Every time we talk about phasing, we have to actually talk about the mechanics of this card. So let's just pretend you cast this card on turn 4. Now, on turn 5, you don't pay the cost. It's going to phase out. Okay, so on turn 5, you can't do anything with your 4-drop. Now on turn 6, Warping Worm phases back in, But the real beauty is, phasing happens during your untap step, which means that you're still gonna have to deal with the upkeep cost even on turn 6. So if you pay the 4 mana, now your Warping Worm has come back in, effectively having haste with a counter on it. You've got yourself a 2/2 worm on turn 6. This card is so bad, guys. It is so bad on so many levels. This could have just been number 1. It's one of the worst cards ever printed, and it's just a hilariously broken design. Warping Worm, number 3. However, Warping Worm is only to be outdone by Zephyr Spirit, one of the worst cards ever with some of the coolest art ever. Zephyr Spirit, a common from way back in Ravnica City of Guilds, is 5 colorless and a blue for a 0/6 spirit. Does not fly. When Zephyr Spirit blocks, return it to its owner's hand. I get it. Maybe you're playing a deck where your creatures assign their damage equal to their toughness instead of their power because you've got like Doran or some other thing like that, Arcades. This is still just going to be a 6 mana 6/6, which is still bad. But if you don't have some kind of synergy like this is actually just a totally useless card. A 6-drop, guys. 6-drop. 0/6, no abilities. Just a horrible drawback if you ever actually engage in combat with Zephyr Spirit. This might actually just be number 1. It's just that number 1 on the list is so iconic that we're gonna go with that one. But I'm telling you, this card, Zephyr Spirit, is astonishing with amazing art. And here we go with number 1. Guys, it's Wood Elemental's time. I think you probably saw this coming if you've ever really thought about what the worst creature ever in the history of Magic is. Here's how Wood Elemental works. It reads, as Wood Elemental enters, sacrifice any number of untapped forest. Wood Elemental's power and toughness are each equal to the number of forests sacrificed as it entered. This brilliantly designed rare creature from Legends costs 3 colorless, 1 green. It's a 0/0. It's not a 0/1. If you play this and do not do anything, it just dies. It ceases to exist. It's not Takano's Cavalry, a 1/1 for 4. That was caviar. No. This is actually just a 0/0. So if you play it, do nothing, creature dies. Let's pretend that you cast this on like turn 6, okay? You cast Wood Elemental. You have to sacrifice an untapped forest for each point of power and toughness you want Wood Elemental to have. You have to sacrifice 2 untapped forests for this to be a 2/2 for 4. And while they have printed lots of cards over the years, Light from the Loam, Titania, that are interesting and play well with things that want you to sacrifice lands, this isn't even good. It just gets you the actual rate, but you have to sacrifice untapped lands. You can't even use them before sacrificing them. This card's so bad. This is the worst creature of all time. I think when you compare it to all the rest, you think about it, it's indescribably horrible. There's no situation I can think of where I would be happy to play this card. It would be a novelty in one of the decks I talked about, but even then, I think it's just bad. I don't think it's good because I don't think it gets big enough. You have to sacrifice so many lands. Anyway, that's my picks for the worst creatures of all time. Leave your comments below. Do you agree or disagree? Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.